Pro-democracy protests in Algeria have been unrelenting. The anger, fueled by a government many Algerians believe has squandered the nation's economic potential.
We've had the same incompetent people governing us for 50 years. We've had enough. It has to change. They've got to stop looting the country. They've got to stop playing musical chairs. There are skills in our country that can be exploited to make it prosper.
The Algerian economy relies heavily on oil, which accounts for 95% of the nation's exports. But much of this money goes to subsidies. The nation's crude output has also declined due to a lack of investment in infrastructure. The IMF has downgraded its growth forecast for Algeria to 2.3% this year, from a previous projection of 2.7%. More than 1 in 10 Algerians are jobless. Unemployment for people under 30, who make up 2/3 of the population, is at 26%. The country's foreign exchange reserves have also fallen to $79 billion. That's less than half the nearly $180 billion Algeria had in 2014. The protests have already forced Algeria's leader of 20 years, Abdelaziz Bouteflika, out of office. Interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah has promised to hold elections in July, but people want him gone too.
We don't want them in charge of the transition. We don't want them organizing the elections because we don't trust them.
Economists say the next government needs to invest in promising industries like tourism and agriculture to help reduce Algeria's reliance on oil. Relaxing restrictions on foreign investment could also help bring in fresh capital and much-needed jobs. That might give protesters fed up with the way the nation's been run in the past, a future to look forward to. Paolo Monticello, TRT World.
Let's get more on the story now with Emily Hawthorne in Austin, Texas. She's the Middle East and North Africa analyst at the geopolitical intelligence firm Stratfor. Welcome to the program, Emily. We saw incredible scenes in Paolo's story there of protesters returning to the streets on Friday. Tell us more about the economic conditions that have helped fuel the movement in Algeria.
So as your correspondent mentioned, this is a very oil and gas wealthy country, but it is very unhealthily dependent on oil and gas, particularly gas, as its main source of government revenue. And that does fuel a vast subsidy network, but it also fuels a vast patronage network, which is part of the complaints about corruption that protesters continue to lob at the government over these last 9 weeks. This economy is not diversified. It doesn't have a very healthy private sector. It doesn't really have much of a market economy. It's also very closed off from the outside world. Algeria has a historic reticence to court foreign investment as well as to take out foreign debt. And these are leading to issues like the foreign currency reserves continuing to trickle out over the last few years. You can see that steady decline. And all of these are leading to a very unstable situation for what is one of North Africa's biggest and most important countries.
Yes, I'd like to ask you about Algeria's resource wealth because it does have the 10th largest proven reserves of natural gas in the world. It also has 12 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. Where is that lucrative revenue going?
So one of the problems with those oil reserves and the gas reserves in particular is they are in desperate need of more investment, new infrastructure, enhanced recovery techniques to try and really improve what Algeria can get out of the ground. So it does have those vast amount of resources, but it needs help sort of advancing the infrastructure, the oil and gas infrastructure in the country. But Algeria has some of the most tricky foreign investment terms in the world, certainly in the certainly in the Middle East. So this is a problem that Algeria might have to loosen up on if it wants to continue to reap the benefits from its oil and gas reserves. And then who is getting the wealth? The last 20 years really have seen the growth of a large patronage network around the former president now, Abdelaziz Bouteflika. There's an effort to try and economically placate various elites around him and elites associated with the military and other members of the political elite. And so a lot of this oil and gas revenue is going to them and not necessarily to creating economic opportunity for ordinary Algerians.
Interesting. You mentioned the issue of diversifying Algeria's economy. It's an issue that Saudi Arabia has only started to deal with itself. Have there been any attempts in Algeria to diversify the economy away from just oil and gas?
There have been attempts. There have been attempts to, put money into the agricultural sector, which still employs a lot of Algerians, but does not contribute a lot to the country's GDP, or certainly not to government revenue. And there's been some effort to try and put some money into tourism. But the government overall does not have a very open attitude to trying to fling open the doors in Algeria to foreign tourists, such as we've seen in other North African countries like Morocco, which has a very healthy tourism sector, Tunisia, which has an improving tourism sector, Egypt, for example. So there are things that the government has done, but they really would have to sow into the private sector and not be so reliant on the public sector. And that's really the key problem.
Okay, Emily Hawthorne, we will have to leave it there, but thank you again for your insights on Money Talks.